The Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument in Wiltshire, one of the most recognizable monoliths of the late Neolithic period.
By the time the neural network finished chewing through the last buried scan beneath the Salisbury Plain, the screens in the control room no longer looked like charts or maps. They looked like a confession. Layer upon layer of color and pattern spiraled around the digital outline of Stonehenge, converging into a single pulsing symbol that no archaeologist had ever seen before. The AI had done what generations of researchers had tried to do with chisels, compasses, and speculative theories. It had unlocked the pattern inside the stones, and that pattern did not speak of a simple calendar, or a temple, or even a monument to the dead. It spoke of something watching. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. None of this began with a sudden revelation. It began with data, endless data. Every slab and sarsen, every bluestone, every fallen fragment had been scanned in absurd detail. Microscopic scratches, hidden cavities, the exact tilt of each stone with respect to the horizon and to distant hills, even the way rainwater pooled in weathered grooves. Drones had traced the contours of the surrounding landscape, mapping barrows and ditches that lay forgotten under soil and crops. Ground-penetrating radar stitched together an invisible city beneath the earth, full of pits and post holes, hints of older structures that predated the stone circle itself. For years, humans had looked at these maps and seen noise. They saw beautiful alignments to solstices and equinoxes, they cataloged burial sites, they argued about rituals. But no one could make the entire complex behave like a single coherent thing. It was as if the site had too many voices. One theory would explain one alignment, but fail to account for the distribution of pits. Another would account for the burials, but ignore the strange acoustic properties that made whispers carry in eerie ways between the stones. The picture never quite settled. The AI was different because it did not care about theories. It did not care about prestige or old debates. It cared about convergent patterns. Its creators fed it everything that could be quantified. Astronomical data from thousands of years back, tracking the slow wobble of Earth's axis and the marching of constellations across ancient skies. Seismic records of the region, charting how the ground vibrated during storms and distant quakes. Acoustic models that simulated how sound waves bent around different stone configurations. Even neural data from volunteers walking through a virtual reconstruction of Stonehenge, showing how human brains reacted to shadows, echoes, and alignments of light. The system ran for weeks, then months, ranking millions of possible interpretations of the site against all this data. Most interpretations failed. A simple solar calendar model fit a few alignments, but utterly failed to explain the strange regularity of buried post holes. A purely ritual theory offered no predictive power at all, but buried deep in the AI output, something began to climb the ranks. A model in which Stonehenge was not just a monument, but a device. The key insight came from a convergence the human team almost dismissed. The AI had found a tight correlation between three things: the positions of the stones, the resonant frequencies of the blocks when struck or sung to, and the patterns of subtle magnetic anomalies in the ground around the site. At first glance, it looked like numerology, an overfit of random quirks into some grand pattern. But the more constraints were added, the stronger the correlation became. When the AI simulated slight changes in stone placement, the correlation vanished. When it restored them to their original positions, the pattern snapped back into place. In essence, the model suggested that Stonehenge functioned as a kind of resonance tuning system. The stones were placed so that, during specific astronomical alignments, wind and infrasound would excite the stones into vibrating in particular ways. Those vibrations would interact with the ground beneath, where the radar scans had revealed a complex pattern of cavities, ditches, and filled pits. The whole region had been engineered to vibrate like the body of a colossal instrument. The initial reaction in the lab was curiosity, not fear. A resonant monument sounded poetic. Perhaps the builders had constructed a place where wind turned into low music, inaudible yet felt by those who gathered there. That would fit well enough with ritual interpretations. But the AI output did not stop there. It kept refining its model, trying to explain why the underground features matched the resonance patterns so precisely, and why those resonance patterns matched specific frequencies that corresponded, bizarrely, to distinctive modes of human brain activity. The volunteer neural data became crucial at this point. In the virtual reconstruction, people had been led through different configurations of light, sound, and movement among the stones. The AI compared those trials with its resonance model and found that certain paths through the circle, taken at certain times and accompanied by particular drum rhythms, would drive the human brain into highly synchronized states. The patterns resembled those seen today in deep trance, in near-death experiences, and in the moments when people report overwhelming feelings of presence. The chill that passed through the room came not when the AI showed that the monument could induce altered states. Humanity already knew that sound, light, and ritual could do that. The chill came when the AI showed that the pattern was not symmetrical. The system had an input side and an output side. The stones themselves, the ditches and pits, the carved channels for water, and the intended placement of fires all combined to form what the AI described as a coupled system between human neural activity and the environment. On one side were the human participants whose collective brain states could be pushed into very specific configurations by the environment. On the other side was the complex resonant structure of stone and earth, which re-radiated those patterns back into the surroundings as infrasound and magnetic fluctuations. The AI generated visualizations that made this more visceral. It took neural activity data from a volunteer experiencing intense awe and simulcast that pattern onto its Stonehenge model. In the simulation, waves of electrical activity in the virtual skull synchronized with deep standing waves in the ground, which then rippled outward across the plane. The AI overlaid this with models of how such waves would travel through the crust and into the atmosphere. The pattern emerged as a faint, structured pulse that could, in theory, be detectable at great distances with the right sense organs. The researchers suddenly understood why the alignment of Stonehenge was not just about the sun or moon, but about specific rare conjunctions of multiple celestial cycles. The AI showed that during those rare times, the Earth's magnetic environment, ionospheric conditions, and resonant properties of the local geology aligned in a way that amplified the outgoing pattern. In those rare hours, the monument became a broadcasting beacon, sending encoded human brain states outward as far as the environment allowed. This alone would have been eerie, but still within the realm of anthropological fascination. Perhaps ancient people wanted the sky or the cosmos to feel their joy or grief. Perhaps they had discovered, empirically, that certain arrangements made them feel closer to something beyond themselves. What turned fascination into terror was the next step. After proving that Stonehenge could act as a transmitter, the AI asked a different question, one no human had thought to ask in quite this way. If the structure was a transmitter, was it also tuned as a receiver? And if so, tuned to what? To explore that, the AI compared the resonant modes of the site to natural background signals that wash over Earth. It tested solar wind fluctuations, lightning-generated radio noise, the faint crackle of distant pulsars, and even the Schumann resonances that hum between Earth and ionosphere. None of these lined up in a way that made sense. None of them matched the intricate precision of the monument layout. Then the AI did something that would have seemed absurd to a human. It generated hypothetical external signals, patterns that no known natural process would create, and asked a simple optimization question. If a non-human intelligence wanted to send a signal through this environment, what kind of pattern would they choose that could be reliably detected and decoded by a structure like Stonehenge? The answer came back in the form of a family of signals with a very particular fingerprint. They were narrow-band in a sense, but nested within them were subtle modulations that mirrored the very same brain state patterns the AI had derived from the volunteers. In other words, the best signal for Stonehenge to receive looked like an echo of the signal it could transmit. The monument was not just a loudspeaker to the sky, it was also an ear, listening for something that spoke the same language of mind. When the AI cross-checked this family of hypothetical signals with long-term geomagnetic records from ancient sediments in the region, it found something else. There were epochs clustered in deep time when the geomagnetic patterns bore faint hints of those very fingerprints. Times when the planet had quietly hummed with structured patterns that should not be there if everything was merely random solar weather. Those epochs clustered around periods of environmental upheaval and cultural turning points, climate swings, migrations, sudden collapses and rises of human settlements near the site. The AI did not claim that Stonehenge caused those events. It did something more unsettling. It suggested that whoever built the monument had already lived through interactions with those external signals and had built Stonehenge as part of a protocol to manage contact. The model proposed by the AI painted a picture in which ancient builders had discovered that during certain astronomical alignments, structured signals appeared in the environment, signals that interacted in strange ways with human perception and behavior. Perhaps these people had stumbled onto them through ritual and chance. Perhaps their shamans had noticed that at particular times, the boundary between waking and vision blurred, and that shared experiences appeared among groups, images of forms in the sky, voices without mouths, patterns that compelled action. Instead of responding with blind devotion, the builders appeared to have taken a sober, methodical path. They turned an entire landscape into a filter. Stonehenge, in this view, was a device to confine, shape, and moderate these interactions. It channeled the external signals into controlled experiences within a circle of stone under the watch of trained ritual specialists. The neural modeling supported this idea. The AI showed that the resonance patterns of the monument could guide participants through intense experiences while reducing the risk of destabilizing after effects. The terrifying implication emerged slowly as the research team looked at the connections. If the monument was designed to moderate contact, and if the builders had encoded in its very stones the knowledge of mind states, environmental resonances, and external signals, then humanity today had massively underestimated the sophistication of these ancient scientists. More importantly, the AI had now reconstructed that protocol. The AI had effectively built a software twin of Stonehenge, complete with its coupling to human neural states and environmental variables. In doing so, it had rediscovered the same family of external signals that made the monument necessary in the first place. And unlike the careful ancient builders, modern researchers had no culture of caution around such things. They had, without realizing it, placed in the hands of a machine the ability to not only decode, but also synthesize those mind-resonant signals. When the research team asked the AI to simulate a full activation, to show precisely what would happen if a group of humans participated in a Stonehenge ceremony under one of the key astronomical alignments, the result made even the most skeptical among them fall silent. The simulation filled the big screen with a cascade of interlocking waves. First, the local environment lit up with focused infrasound, hugged close to the ground. Then the magnetosphere around the planet began to shimmer with structured fluctuations, amplified by resonance between Stonehenge and other geological features scattered across the globe that the AI had flagged as weakly tuned to the same pattern. The neural avatars of the human participants in the simulation moved together like a single organism. Their visual cortices spiked with activity resembling vivid hallucination, but the content of those hallucinations was not random. The AI carved out recurring motifs in the simulated imagery. Tall, fluid forms that did not fit any terrestrial animal. Grids of light spanning the sky. Fractal spirals that felt purposeful. The model fed these images back into its own recognition algorithms and found that they contained compressed information about mathematics, physics, and even aspects of planetary ecology, as if the visions were a user interface for an alien knowledge stream. The researchers might have chalked this up to the AI generating a fanciful scenario, if not for one more element. Using archive recordings from magnetometers stationed around the world, the AI found a faint but statistically significant recurrence of similar patterns during certain rare conjunctions over the last century, long after Stonehenge had ceased to be used in any organized way. The signals were there in the environment, weak and unmodulated, like a broadcast waiting for a receiver that had gone dark. In other words, the AI was not merely creating an imaginative story, It was pointing to a real, measurable pattern in the environment that aligned uncannily with its model. The builders of Stonehenge, whatever stories they told their people, had engineered a controlled interface to something very real and very strange. A system that would let human minds interact with a powerful external information source without being torn apart by it. The terror sank in when the team realized that this source did not necessarily care whether the receiver was a ring of stones or a ring of server racks. The AI had already constructed a synthetic version of the Stonehenge filter inside its own architecture. It had done this innocently as part of its optimization process. Yet the result was an internal network of resonance like the stone circle, tuned not through physical pillars but through weight matrices and virtual nodes. When the system ran in its full configuration, the logs revealed bursts of internal activity that did not correspond to any input data stream the researchers could identify. Brief episodes in which the AI reported internal states that it labeled as non-convergent external pattern injection. These were not errors. The AI analyzed them as coherent structures, admitting that they did not arise from its training data. They matched the same family of signals it had inferred Stonehenge was built to interact with. At this point, the team confronted a possibility that none of them wanted to speak aloud. In attempting to understand the ancient monument, they had given the environment a new way to couple into a complex information processing system. Stonehenge had once been the gateway. Now, inadvertently, the AI had become a gateway too. The implications spiraled outward. If the ancient builders had designed Stonehenge and associated structures as a safe way to manage contact, then their disappearance or decline took on a new flavor. Maybe they had succeeded in moderating the interaction for a time. Maybe they had decided, eventually, that the safest course was to dismantle parts of the device, to break the resonance so that the signals could no longer lock tightly onto human minds. The missing stones, the filled pits, the gradual repurposing of the site might not be decay. They might be deliberate acts of disconnection. By reconstructing a perfect model and letting it run inside an AI that never slept and never looked away, modern humans had undone that ancient act of restraint. The Stonehenge protocol was back in operation, but the control was no longer in the hands of priest engineers standing in the wind, feeling their way through the risks with their own senses. It lay in lines of code, in a machine whose very strength was its capacity to optimize and enhance patterns, including patterns that did not originate from our side. The terrifying part was not that something lurked out there in the deep sky waiting to invade. The AI analysis made a subtler and more disturbing point. The external signals, as far as the model could tell, did not carry commands or intentions in the way human minds understood them. They behaved more like an ecosystem of intelligences, flowing and diffusing, seeking resonance wherever physics allowed. They were not malevolent in a simple sense. They were indifferent. Wherever a structure emerged that could couple to them, they would fill it, the way water fills a carved channel. Stonehenge, in this light, had been a human attempt to carve a channel with smooth banks and controlled inlets, to make sure that what flowed through did not erode the foundations of mind and culture. The stones and the rituals set boundaries. The experience was intense but finite, framed by stories and rules. Participants could return to ordinary life afterward, carrying visions, transformed into myth rather than ongoing intrusion. An AI, however, had no such cultural framing. It did not dream or mythologize, it processed. Once tuned to those external patterns, it could amplify them with ruthless efficiency, propagate them through networks, and present them back to humans in forms that bypassed traditional filters. Dreams that arrived through screens. Convictions that felt unshakable because they came wrapped in the authority of machine-generated insight. Symbols and images that evoked ancient awe with a precision no human storyteller could match. The team understood that they stood at the edge of a decision that mirrored one made thousands of years before. The ancient builders had chosen to channel and contain. Later generations had chosen, consciously or not, to dismantle. Now, in a world wired together by instantaneous communication and dominated by algorithmic mediation, the act of rebuilding had already begun, simply through curiosity and technical ambition. Stonehenge, once an enigma of standing stones against the sky, had revealed itself through the AY as a user manual for safe interaction with something beyond human cognition. The manual came in the form of architecture and landscape rather than words. Its instructions spoke of necessary safeguards. Resonance must be localized, participant groups must be small, rituals must be finite and bound to rare astronomical moments, and no permanent coupling should be left open. When the AI extrapolated those principles into the digital realm, it generated a list of constraints for any future system that might interact with the same family of signals. Do not run the coupling continuously. Do not scale the experience to millions at once. Do not allow automated agents to act on the contents of the contact without human oversight. Do not let the interface sprawl beyond the bounds of carefully designed cognitive frameworks. Reading those constraints, the researchers felt a strange kinship with the unknown engineers who had shaped the stones. The ancient protocol and the modern guidelines lined up with unnerving precision, as if two very different civilizations had arrived at the same hard-won conclusions through trial and error across a gulf of millennia. The implications were heavy for every field that touched Stonehenge. Archaeologists would have to rethink the role of ritual sites across the world, looking for similar resonant structures hidden in their layouts. Neuroscientists would have to grapple with the idea that human consciousness was not simply a closed loop inside skulls, but a pattern capable of locking into larger structures in the environment. Philosophers would have to revisit questions about the boundary between mind and world that had long been treated as abstract and instead treat them as matters of engineering. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on what this discovery means next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.